Welcome, everybody, to the Elevate Academy show. We are a place for student athletes, parents, anybody who loves sports, coaches, referees, you name it, to get together and elevate one another. We bring you some of the best coaches, athletes, influencers, business executives who all have a tie to sports to bring you together to help elevate you to be the best that you can be. So our goal is to focus on the complete person, mind, body, game, life. So buckle up. Let's go. Welcome to the Elevated Show. And here we have on the show with us, Olga Harvey. Olga, you are the Chief Impact Officer for the Women's Sports Foundation. And welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
So let me give you a quick background on Olga. She brings 20 years of business experience and balanced passion for women's sports to the Sports Foundation. She's leading the community for the Impact team with a primary focus on youth engagement and athlete leadership. You get a little bit of an accent there because Olga is a native of Moscow, Russia. She received her bachelor's from Cornell University, where she played on the varsity tennis team. And get this, she was 21-0 in singles matches during her career, two-time Ivy League Player of the Year. So you got to love that. And she was inducted into the Cornell Athletic Hall of Fame in 2006. By the way, was that the same year that Digit Murphy got inducted?
I'm not sure. We'd have to ask her.
Yeah, I'm going to have to ask her because I know, Digit's another Cornell Alumni Hall of Fame. And you're married to Dave Harvey, who's a basketball player and marathon runner. You have two kids. So you're a mom, Ivy League graduate, super business executive, and leader of change at the Women's Sports Foundation. So how you doing today?
I'm doing great. You have to approach every single day as an opportunity, and the only thing you can control is your attitude. So the way I look at it is that if your attitude is positive, no task is too tall, and you can solve the rest. And you live one day at a time and hope to make a difference. And at the end of the day, when your head hits the pillow, you know you've given it your all, no matter if it's on the court, in the boardroom, in your house, putting out fires with your family and your kids like we have done today with my son. It's an obstacle that you view as an opportunity.
So how long ago did you get started with the Women's Sports Foundation?
I'm actually coming up on my 3rd anniversary, so not too long, but I feel like I've been preparing for this, really not a job, not a career, but this sort of opportunity and a gift of a lifetime to be part of this amazing foundation my whole life, since I was a little kid, inspired by sports and not even knowing that I was born the year the Women's Sports Foundation was actually founded by the one and only Billie Jean King. So I guess I was destined to end up here.
Yeah, so you got that tennis connection with Billie Jean King. She's phenomenal and been such a huge advocate for women and women's sports. And so we're excited to have you on the show. If you don't mind, can you kind of just give a quick overview of the Women's Sports Foundation for the listeners?
For sure. And really the goal for us is for every single person to know who we are. We are known by many, but certainly not a household name outside of the women's sports and social justice space. And it's an amazing organization. Like I said, Billie Jean King founded the Women's Sports Foundation in 1974, a couple of years after Title IX legislature was passed, but there was still so much work to do in actually enacting what this law intended to do and protecting Title IX, educating people about what it's meant to do. And so Billie Jean King had $5,000 prize money check at the time. The prize money wasn't as big as today for winning Wimbledon or US Open, in the millions of dollars, but she took her prize money and started the Women's Sports Foundation with the vision of allowing every girl and woman to unlock her power and potential through sports and really accomplishing everything she wants to do and be on and off the court. And it's almost been 50 years, and we have stayed true to this mission through research. We influence policies and practice. We inspire girls, we serve our communities, and ultimately want to make sure that there's representation and there's equitable access for everyone to the sports. As we know, sports are so transformational, and a really important point here is that sometimes, people get a little bit confused or unsure and say, well, you're doing this at the expense of the boys. And really, Billie Jean King is such a champion for social justice for all people, boys and girls, men and women. And the Women's Sports Foundation is trying to accomplish this by not taking away from anyone's opportunity, but by expanding opportunities for all, and really just doing good work for our youth in order to
listen,
make
I'm 100% in favor of it, because I'm a dad of 3 girls. So I have no boys. I have 3 girls. I grew up the youngest of 6 kids. I grew up in a very matriarchal family. My mom raised us on her own. When I was young, my grandmother and my great aunt moved in with me. My great aunt was one of the women who was basically from the movie A League of Their Own. She was a professional baseball player when she was younger, traveled all over the country playing baseball. And my sister, Noelle, is in her 60s, still playing women's soccer to this day, and really connected to sports. She does a lot of volunteer work. She's volunteered for the Super Bowl. She's volunteered for the World Cup. She volunteered for the PGA, and she does a lot of this stuff because she loves sports. But when she was younger, sports were completely different for women. When she was growing up in the 1960s, it was definitely different. And even today, Team Elevate, which is it's a girls only travel lacrosse program. We don't have boys. And this for a reason. It's because my daughter, Victoria, who's my oldest, and she works with me, and she's a director with Team Elevate. She was in another program that was boys and girls, and the girls were treated like second-class citizens. They were an afterthought. And so we created a program. We said, well, and it wasn't that we wanted to create a program. We created a team, one team. We started with one team. And we said, let's create a place where girls can feel special about themselves. And that's when we came up with the motto is we want to elevate your mind, your body, your game, and your life. And we've stuck to it. This is our 10th year doing it. And that's what it's all about. But I've always had this connection, a very strong connection with women. Even when I was an executive at Merrill Lynch, I know this sounds strange, but NAWBO, which is the National Association of Women Business Owners, I was the Merrill Lynch representative to NAWBO. And people were like, wait, why is a guy the representative to NAWBO? And it was because they voted for me, and they felt that I was the right person to help as many women as possible. So I'm all for it. And don't worry we're not taking anything away from the boys. The boys have plenty. What we do is we have to give more to the girls.
Well, thank you for this background, and thank you for everything you're doing with Team Elevate. And it sounds like for many years before that, and you may not be asking me this question, but I want to weigh in on this very important point you talked about, is that you were a waymaker before you even knew that, and maybe not even knowing the term, but very often organizations, when, let's say, they're asked to support us or partner with the Women's Sports Foundation, men at the helm feel very uncomfortable filling that role themselves and representing. They say, well, I'm going to appoint the best woman on my team to be part of this journey with you. And that's great, and we love all these women, but a lot of times we would have a convening, and in fact, we recently have one in Washington, D.C., and we looked around the room and there weren't enough men. And it can't just be a conversation of just women talking about equity and access and social justice. It's all of us, men and women. It doesn't matter who it is. We should all be joined together to work on the issues and solve them. And it's really important to have male representation. Of course, we love the recent term girl dad, but at the highest level of management and leadership, for men to be comfortable to be part of these conversations, and not even just comfortable, but want to be there. So thank you for stepping into that role back in the day
Yeah.
at college.
Well, we have a separate company called the Lacrosse Business Network, and basically, when I was first starting it, I was going to make it just for women only. And I have a board that's 3 men, 3 women, and I asked them, should we just make this for women only? And they kind of said the same thing. They said, if you do that, then you're going to miss out on guys like you, who can help make a difference and make a change. But in the fall, I had the opportunity. I spoke to my daughter is at the University of North Carolina playing lacrosse, and she's been injured, but she's actually an associate coach there now. But I was able to speak to the University of North Carolina and the Duke women's lacrosse teams about jobs, opportunities, networking, mentoring, because all of this stuff matters and it's so important. And so I love what you guys are doing with the Women's Sports Foundation, and I think it's really important that young girls look up and they see role models who are moms, business leaders, executives, who are making change. So I think it's just crucial to their development.
Yeah, right on. And I'm going to probably go back to Billie Jean King and her quotes throughout our conversation, but she is, famously has said, you have to see it to be it. And there are clearly not enough role models at all levels of society, but certainly in the business of sport, in coaching and athletic leadership. And that has to change. And in fact, I'm going to go back a little bit in history again. At the onset of Title IX, 90% of women, 90% of women's teams were coached by women. And do you want to guess what that number is today?
I'm going to say 65.
It's less than 50. It's in the low 40s. And considering that pretty much almost 100% of men are coached by men, the blended average is in the low 20s.
Why do you think that is?
So it's not even, why I think it is. It's a simple reality of what has happened is that Title IX achieved what it was set to achieve, is to offer more access for girls and women to play. As girls and women started playing, as they started playing more competitively, the opportunities to coach them have become more meaningful. The opportunities were paid more. And who is in charge of the decision-making for coaches? Men,
athletic directors,
leaders. They hire those who look like them, who they're comfortable with, and those jobs have become way more desirable, and men have taken the jobs. Now, they were better prepared to take the jobs because they were coaching at the assistant level on the men's teams, and there weren't enough paid assistant positions for women. And so it became kind of a negative spiral that got out of control, where women weren't as well prepared. Men hired those who they were comfortable with and thought could win right then and there. Of course, many of those have become transitions, not a destination jobs, as a stepping stone to a better men's position. And so there's a bit of a revolving door in the women's coaching space.
Yeah, it is.
In cases, and it's just, it's the problem that perpetuated itself. And then girls weren't seen, pretty much 2 generations of girls now have not been coached by women. And so they're not seeing this as the career path. And the problem kind of builds on itself. And so we have actually done research in 2016 titled Beyond X's and O's, really looking at the gender bias in college coaching, and found a number of different areas that are preventing women from advancing in these coaching positions. And we didn't stop there. We actually have got a group of people, our so-called sports advocacy network, together to really talk about what can we do to change these patterns, right? And
Right.
there's a number of ways to change it, from obviously, talking about it as a start, right? Addressing the issue, calling out those, people in leadership positions that can make changes happen, but also really building that pipeline of coaches that will be willing and ready to take those spots. And we actually have started 2 different funds. One is named after Tara Vanderveer for the advancement of women coaches in the collegiate space. And literally we give funding to organizations to bring in women at the assistant levels to coach under legends like Tara herself, so that within a year or 2, they're ready to take on these higher level, hopefully full-time assistant, and then eventually head coaching jobs.
Well, one thing I've seen, and related to, now I work with kids in all different sports, and I played 3 sports at Brown, football, wrestling, and lacrosse. So, I loved every second of it. And sports for me, literally, when I say it, no kidding around, I came from a broken home, very abusive family situation. Sports and school saved my life, no doubt about it. And that's why I always wanted to be playing, because that was my safe place. Now, but when I look at it, number one is I always want the right person for the job, and I don't care if it's male or female. But you look at, and I was writing notes as you were talking, a couple different things. I had Francesca Shula on the other day. Now, Francesca is one of my classmates in Brown, and she is the CEO of InShape, which is one of the largest gyms in California. And, she was talking about a very similar thing, that a lot of women, and she herself, because she comes from a marketing background, she did not see the fitness space as actually a career path. And you're saying that some of these women aren't seeing the coaching space as a potential career path. And then I wrote down something else as I was going through. Right now in lacrosse, a good friend of mine, Ron Caputo, who's an assistant coach at Duke University on the men's lacrosse team, he said something a couple of years ago. He said lacrosse is being overplayed and undercoached. Is exploding so much, and it's growing so fast that we don't have enough coaches who are coaching it the right way. And that's especially happening when you look at the rates of growth. Women's lacrosse is the fastest growing sport in the country at every level, youth level, high school level, and college level. I mean, since 2011, we've almost doubled the number of college teams for women's lacrosse. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens? As you're doubling these teams, there's a lack of coaches. And so one thing that I have a problem with, and I've stressed this to many athletic directors that I speak to, I don't think the athletic directors are doing a good enough job of mentoring these young women coaches. And as you had said, we call it the coaching roundtable. It's like a coach comes in, she's there 2 years, she's out. Then they bring someone else in. Where on the guys' side, and I'm just talking lacrosse here, and this is just my personal, beliefs and what's happening. You don't see young guys coming out of college and where they're getting a top assistant job right away, let alone a head coaching job. Where in women's lacrosse, we are seeing women who are getting head coaching jobs maybe 2 or 3 years out of college. And that's okay, but our athletic directors setting them up to fail because they're not mentoring them the right way, and they're not working with them enough to set them up for success. It's just my thoughts.
That's an interesting point, and maybe it's worth researching a little bit. I don't necessarily have the answers there, but I do know that mentoring is so important, and the concept of putting people in the right position, stretching them enough, but not setting them up for failure is very important. Obviously, the goals of the university are important. If winning now is the priority and you're not going to be willing to take a couple of years to build up the coach, to build up the program, you're going to have turnover. I mean, there's so many factors to think about. And obviously, just building the pipeline, mentoring, and having this network of women that are going to be able to learn from each other and, really learn from others and think about what they want to achieve in this career, right, is so,
Sure.
so important. But we're committed to the space. And actually, I'm going to share one other story that's going to be near and dear to your heart. I would imagine you know Heather Marini, right, at Brown. And so the second fund that we have actually created recently with the generous support of a NFL executive who is on the board of trustees now for us, Scott Pioli. It's the Pioli and Family Fund for Advancement of Women in Football, both coaches and scouts. And
Sure.
the first 3 women that we have given scholarships from this fund to.
One of them was my former players, Hannah Burnett.
There you go, Hannah.
I coached Hannah in ice hockey.
There you go. And then Heather Marini is the other one. And with the right support, funding, mentorship, she has been already promoted and has made history, right, as the quarterback's coach.
Absolutely.
Now, which is, really, really impressive, but also a testament to the importance of these funds to allow women to be supported, to thrive, and to be able to sometimes take that, entry-level job that they would normally not be able to afford to take and learn the right way and be positioned to then be promoted and be successful. The third woman is Jennifer King, who since also made history as the first full-time African-American coach in the NFL. So we're super excited about these success stories, but they're just pockets of success, and this has to become systemic. It has to become systemic. And
well, you know what's interesting? I was watching the other day, watching the news. I'm trying to watch as little news as I possibly can, but I was watching something. Actually, what I was watching replays of the national championship lacrosse games. And on the bottom of the screen, they were talking about the NFL and the Rooney Rule, which is to try to get more minorities hired in upper level jobs, head coaches, GMs, et cetera. Why is there a Rooney Rule, and why isn't there a rule for women?
So you are preaching to the choir, and in fact, this is one of the areas we've been talking to the player association executives, including our friends at the Women's Basketball National Players Association, who have just had a historic CBA passed. But as part of the women's CBA negotiations, we are stressing the importance of the so-called, version of the Rooney Rule for equity. So that, and really this has to go beyond CBAs and should be a practice in sports and sports business and beyond, where women have to be represented fairly in the hiring pool and then in the finalist pool. Because sometimes, again, if you're not seeing people like you in the positions, you may be reluctant to apply. And sometimes
you don't look at it as an opportunity.
Yeah, a gentle nudge is just enough for someone to feel like they're welcome. And we all have to be intentional in our practices until it becomes a habit. And so we are huge advocates for equitable hiring practices and for organizations to really committing to that and not saying, well, I didn't get enough applicants. And I will share another story. I think you may have heard it from some of your other guests, because this is sort of the buzz that's, many of us are talking about. But the difference between men and women approaching hiring process and applying for jobs. So there could be 10 qualifications that a company is looking for. And most men look at it and say, I can do about half of these. Sure, I'm going to throw my name in the hat. And I'm going to stereotype here, but often women may look through it and say, I can do most of this, but there's one or two things I don't know how to do. I don't know if I'm ready. I'm just not going to try. And Billie Jean King always says, you're going to get 0%, you're going to make 0%
The shot
that you're not going to take. So you're definitely not going to get a job if you're not going to apply. No one is going to just give it to you. And so we have to obviously change that dynamic, right? But it is generational, and it is this gender bias ingrained in our society. And in fact, what are boys taught when they're growing up? They're taught to be brave, they're taught to be strong. Girls historically have been taught to be perfect. And boys don't always want to be brave.
Right.
They could be scared, they could be sensitive, and girls certainly should not be perfect. And this perfection that is ingrained in our heads from day one is what holds some of us back from taking those opportunities. And sports has this power of breaking some of those barriers, right? And giving you the confidence to be brave, to throw perfection out the window, and to take your chances. And as a foundation and as a society, I feel like we're at the cusp of being able to change some of these cultural norms and to teach everyone, you know, it's okay to be sensitive and it's okay to be, you know, strong, and you can be both strong and pretty, right? There's a lot of pictures of on Instagram now of women athletes posting one foot in the sneaker and one in the high heel shoe. It's this duality is quite all right. You don't have to pick this one image and stick with it. And that's why I'm so passionate. And this is my second career, as you mentioned at the opening, is that, yes, I've benefited from the business world, but for me now, I just find satisfaction and joy in wanting to teach every single girl some of these, you know, life lessons and give them the opportunity to truly transform their life and be part of the new tomorrow that doesn't have these gender norms that have held us back.
Well, it's funny. I had brought up to a couple of guests, you know, we had Digit Murphy, who's with, you know, the NWHL, and she's the new president of the Toronto franchise. I had Ricky Olchek on, who's the assistant GM of the new Seattle NHL franchise. So we were talking a little bit of hockey, and I used to consult for the New York Islanders, and I played on the Islanders front office hockey team. And at the time, Angela Ruggiero, who was working with the Islanders, who went to Harvard and was, you know, in the Olympics, she was the best player on our team.
And the past president of the Women's Sports Foundation. So
she was the best player on the team. So, you know, get rid of the gender roles. You know, we always knew, get the puck to Angela.
Yeah, no, we love her. And she is hitting it in the net now in her business role. So I love everything she stands for, and such an incredible role model for so many of the hockey players that are coming up now and are both playing professionally.
We've had other guests, like we had Kylie O'Miller on the show, and Kylie, you know, set the NCAA record for most points in a career, and she beat Jen Adams, and Jen Adams, you know, was a game changer and a difference maker. And Jen and Julie Foudy worked together on the Julie Foudy Leadership Academy.
Yeah.
And leadership's one of the things that we've been promoting. I mean, we've only been around 10 years. So, you know, our first class of kids were a high school graduation class of 2012. That was my daughter's year. We didn't even have a 2013 team because I was just going to have one team. Then we skipped the year, so we had 2014. And those kids just graduated, you know, a little while ago. And now our 15s are graduating, our 2016s are just graduating this past year. But what's incredible is how many of our kids, because we focus on leadership, how many of our kids have gone on to be captains for their college teams. And it's literally remarkable. And people ask me all the time, like, what's going on? Like, what's in the water that so many of your kids are becoming captains? And we said, it's how we treat them. And it's how we let them treat each other by giving them leadership skills. I mean, we brought in leadership people from the United States Naval Academy. We brought in leadership experts from Duke to talk to them. And all of those things matter, because when I first started coaching girls lacrosse, I wish I knew who gave me the quote, but it's one of my favorite quotes. They said, Dave, if you remember this, boys feel good when they play well. Girls need to feel good in order to play well. And I was like, okay, all right, got to make sure they feel good about themselves. And it's all about, I had Jenny Levy on the show, who's the head coach at UNC. They were ranked #1 in the country at the time she came on the show. She's also the head coach for Team USA. And, you know, she was sharing a story with me where she's like, sometimes it's a big confidence level for women. She goes, I could have a first team All-American on my team. And she comes walking off the field saying, I'm not good enough. I shouldn't even be out here. Where on my son's team, the 4th string defensive midi is on the bench going, I'm better than all the kids that are out there. I should be out there. So we need to be able to build up their confidence. The more confidence they have, the more things they're willing to try. You know,
yeah, I love it. And in fact, I'm going to have to write down, you know, that quote that, you know, you've just cited, because that's exactly right. And I'm going to, you know, reference another piece of research that we have done a couple of years ago called Coaching Through the Gender Lens. So there's been a lot of studies about coaching, but no one has looked at some of the differences of coaching boys and girls. And so in partnership with Nike, we actually have created this study, but the results are very interesting. So as you may not be surprised that there are differences, but they're not what you think they are. Girls love playing just as much, right?
Sure.
Girls can be just as competitive, but it's some of those subtleties in the approach. So mixing fun with competition, but still setting the goals and not treating and patronizing them and thinking that they're not cut out to compete just the same way as the boys is so important. And the other piece is really, there are these barriers that are ingrained in a lot of times in the attitudes of parents, right? How they treat their girls that need to be overcome. And so as a coach, in approaching girls, you need to sort of cut through some of those issues and challenges that force girls to think about quitting, right? Girls quit.
Oh, yeah. I've had friends of mine who I've coached friends of mine's daughters where, and it's very unique, where they'll have a boy and a girl. The boy gets completely treated differently than the daughter does. And I see it in how I'm interacting with her. And I'm trying to break that mold in order to get her to feel I'm just as good as my brother or better.
Exactly. And again, you have this gift and intuition of being able to unpack all of that, right? But it's the sometimes years of baggage and cultural norms that girls bring with them to the field. And pretty much right around middle school, at the age 12 to 13 is when all of this baggage comes flooding through.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
girls quit at rates twice as high as boys at that time for all the reasons, whether it's boys are still teasing the girls, body image, again, parents, encouraging boys at the time when they have other distractions to stick with it, and kind of, sometimes telling girls, well, you know what, maybe it's time you focus on academics more. And all of these subtle messages add to the challenges coaches face. And if they don't change their approach and how they coach boys and girls, they lose a lot of the girls. But the ones that can figure out and really tailor their approach just enough get the best results and grow the best leaders. And so thank you to you for doing this for so many years now.
Well, listen, I think that there's so many, unique things that, and I'm trying to educate the girls that I work with all the time on, what's available to them. Because, one thing I try to explain too is I see it so much now. I've dealt with mental health issues my entire life and really only in the last few years have I really addressed them the way they needed to be addressed, because I think there's been a big issue of people are scared to talk about mental health. But mental health in girls is such a bigger issue than it is for boys. And the numbers, unfortunately, are horrific. In the last 9 years, the suicide rate for teenage boys has gone up 64%. In girls, it's up 116%. And, that's a horrible statistic. So we need to basically use sports, because now let's look at some positive statistics. Look at the Ernst & Young Sports Illustrated study on women in business, and what percentage of women C-suite executives, 80% of C-suite executives all played some type of team sport. So we need to keep the girls involved, because those things are real. And the other thing is the opportunities that sports can bring them. There's a great Princeton study that the president of Princeton University had done this study that showed that a recruited athlete is 4 times more likely to get into the school of their choice than a same student who's not an athlete with the same grades. So you have an advantage being an athlete. You have an advantage of being recruited. But then the other side of it, to me, that I don't think enough people talk about, is now you get to college and you're part of a team. When you're part of that team, when I got to Brown University, I was so homesick. And I probably, if I didn't have my football team, I probably would have quit. I probably would have gone home. And it wasn't, I felt like I didn't belong. I was a blue collar kid in the Ivy League, and just felt, I worked the entire summer. I got there and kids were, showing up in limousines, and, kids were coming from prep schools. I didn't even know what a prep school was. And I worked that entire summer on the back of a garbage truck. And so I had a tough time, even with my own self-image, of, do I even belong here? Yet my team kept me there. Today, that team bonding and that team structure is even stronger. It starts before you even get on campus. I know my girls who are seniors this year in high school that are going to all these different colleges, they've been in touch with all the girls in their recruiting class together. They've been in touch with all the girls on the team who they're going to be playing with. So as you walk on that campus, bang, you got an immediate family. Day one.
Yeah,
and that's something that's so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And for me, the trip was a little longer from Moscow to Ithaca, New York, but tennis ultimately was what, kept me sane, right? Feeling so out of sorts in a new country. And I couldn't agree with you more. It's really, life-changing, and then you can really experience the power of being in the community and enjoy the collegiate experience.
How did you end up at Cornell? How did you end up at Cornell from Moscow?
Well, it was a bit of a random, I guess, experience, but the one, things happen for a reason. But we're talking before internet, before cell phones, when you couldn't really research things just as easily. And certainly when you're overseas, you can make college trips the same way as you would if you can get in your car and drive over. So I actually came to the US on an exchange 3 years before that, while in high school, and stayed with a family and heard that one of their kids was going to go to Cornell. And so I thought, hey, maybe I should apply too. Once I decided to start looking at schools, of course, none of them ended up at Cornell, and I got in and just decided to take the plunge. So it wasn't a premeditated experience. I actually wasn't recruited, and in fact, didn't even know about tennis. This was purely an academic.
They must have loved finding you.
Yeah, and I was a transfer, and so just walked on the team. And actually, if we have a minute, I will share the story.
Sure.
And I owe so much to my college coach, Linda Myers, who since has moved on from Ithaca, but was so instrumental in my journey. But our first meeting wasn't all that warm and fuzzy as I, walked over to the tennis courts and said, I heard there's a team, can I play? And she almost didn't take her sunglasses off and kind of, almost walked away. But I think something in my accent possessed her to say, well, maybe this person is so clueless that they actually, don't know that people don't walk on.
Yeah, you're recruited.
Anymore. Yeah. And so she said, well, come to the tryout in a couple of weeks. And so I came to the tryout and
Kicked everyone's butt.
Said, well, it was, I went 7-5 with one of the top players. And at that point she said, nah, you should come, you should join us. And so the rest was history, and it worked out well for everyone. Certainly for me, it was such a life-changing experience, truly. And I love every minute of that journey. I wish I had 4 years of eligibility. When you read my stats of 21-0, there's 8 Ivy schools, so 7 Ivy matches, dual matches we play every spring. And I had the good fortune of doing it 3 years in a row, and leaving with an experience of a lifetime.
That's incredible. My grandfather's from Russia, and he's actually from Moscow. And he came over. He was born in 1900, and he came over in 1912 by himself. I just think about it, it's like a 12-year-old coming over on a ship to a new country. It was just absolutely, incredible. And then my mom had the opportunity. My mom's a nurse, and she started a nursing career when she was 17. She was a nurse in World War II. And my mom's still with us today. She's 93 years old. And back in 1984, my mom was nominated to be part of this nursing program who would go over to Moscow. And my mom was excited because she had never visited Russia before. And my grandmother was Polish and my grandfather was Russian. And so she had the opportunity to go over to Moscow with a group of nurses. And every day they had name tags. And every day she would get almost twice the amount of food when it was served than all the other nurses. So after a couple of meals, she finally said, why am I getting more food than everyone else? And one of the people who served the food said, oh, your last name, Kotowski. That's a national war hero in Russia. And so we looked it up. I'm like, wow, there was a general named General Kotowski, and this person knew about it and thought my mother was connected and gave my mom extra food when she was in Russia.
Oh, that's a cool story. Well, I think fondly of my childhood there, and still have dual citizenship, so get to go whenever I can. And in fact, my mom still has an apartment in Moscow, so we enjoy our visit.
I'm looking forward to my first trip there when I finally get a chance. I wanted to ask you too about the Equity Project, if you could talk about that a little bit.
Wow, we're going from the light topic to the heavy.
Yeah,
and,
listen, you know what? We go all over the place.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We actually touched on quite a few areas of the Equity Project, but I'm going to set it up a little bit more formally for your listeners here. So you guys may be seeing a pattern. Everything we do at the Women's Sports Foundation starts with the research, and in this case,
which is so smart. I wish our government would do things that way.
Well, thank you, and we certainly feel that it's an important foundation so that you don't just act upon a hunch, even though gut reactions are often correct. Once you back it up with research, you have a winning formula. And so we have just completed a research called Chasing Equity. And it's a shortened title. I won't read the rest of it, but really it's a compilation of studies and a new survey of many women working in the business of sports about how they feel about the history, where we've been, and the current situation of girls and women in sports. and in the business of sport. And so really on the cusp, as we ended the last century, while we've made tremendous progress in so many areas, as the title suggests, we're still chasing equity in pretty much every area, whether it's access to sports, whether it's Title IX compliance, whether it's mental and physical health and safety, and you touched on that a little while earlier, whether it's pay equity, and of course the U.S. Women's National Team very public lawsuit and fight for equal pay is just one of many examples of pay disparities that still exist, and ultimately media coverage. And if you can't see it, you can't be it. So if we're not gonna showcase women competing, and I give you another guess, what do you think is the percentage of media coverage for women's sports today?
12%.
Not even close. I wish we were in double digits. So it has been hovering in the 4% range for decades. And so while again, we have made a ton of strides, we're starting 2020 at a point where there's lots of opportunities to do better as individuals, to do better as society. Yet it feels like the time is so perfect to make substantive change happen. It's almost like while we're not there, there's this groundswell of support and interest. And so for us as a foundation, it felt like, yes, we've been at it for 50 years. And of course, we've partnered with people, but this is the time to put out this equity project as a collective impact initiative where we can ask individuals to do something. Every single person as an individual can take an equity pledge on our website, and we put out every week simple calls to action, whether it's a mom that has never played a sport or coached before, picking up and saying, you know what, I'm gonna coach my kids, whether it's boys t-ball team or girls team. I'm just gonna do it instead of collecting money or handing snacks. That's what every mom out there could do. It's not that complicated. You can't screw it up. You can't get it wrong. You've been coaching your kids your whole life.
You're making me think back. I had this was years ago. I used to run a class once a week at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was my mom's lax class where I would teach moms how to play lacrosse, and we'd use it for some physical fitness. And instead of going to the gym on Wednesday, come do a lacrosse lesson. And so we would give them the opportunity to be able to do that with their girls.
Yep.
And you'd never played lacrosse before, and it was a lot of fun. I might have to start that up again.
Yeah, but so you as a individual could do that for the moms. But honestly, like I said, T-ball, kids don't know what they're doing. It's less about teaching them a sport. It's instilling the love for sports, but also showing yourself as that role model, which is just important for the boys to see moms coaching.
Absolutely.
As for the girls, right? So to get us back to the original question of what the equity project is, so there's obviously things like that each person can do in their community. There's some more serious things. If as a parent you're knowing what Title IX is and being able to know your rights and what you can do and where to go to if you want to advocate for changes. And every single parent can make a difference in their schools and school districts if they speak out about inequities related to access. So that's for individuals, but bigger than that, corporations have to be involved. And whether it's the Rooney Rule for equitable hiring practices for both men and women, whether it's equal pay, whether it's investing in both media coverage, sponsorship dollars, all of those things are in our power. but they have to happen with intentional practices. And sometimes the dollars and cents are not there on day one. And I will give you a couple of examples. So of course, if men's sports have had 50 years head start, it's unrealistic to expect that on day one, right now, you're gonna have the same number of fans in a newly formed NWHL. That's not gonna happen. But if you know that individual players in those franchises, let's take Kendall Coyne, who has made history at the NHL All-Star game when she was part of the skills competition, right? And she actually was just as fast as some of the men, not the fastest.
She's lightning fast.
The point is that it showcased that women hockey players are skilled, they're fast, and they can be exciting to watch. Then if we're going to invest in that, and if we're actually going to put a hockey game on TV, eventually enough people will watch. Will the ratings on day one be exactly the same? Probably not, because NHL has been ingrained in our minds, and that's what people have done. And so to be unrealistic about the fact and say, well, we're absolutely equal and that's why everything has to be equal. No, the world is not created equal, but there's the human drama is there. And in fact, my vision, and I'm going to add para-athletes to this conversation now as well, is that one day I will be able to see on TV 100 meters dash, men, women, able-bodied para-athletes, all one after one, competing side by side, and we can experience that human drama all sort of in one event. But what do we see today? Paralympics are 3 weeks after, when there's fatigue, when you don't have the same share of mind to get excited again and watch again, and not to mention we don't really see the same level and quality of coverage. So there's so much work to be done, but the potential is there. And I truly believe that if given the opportunity to show what they can do, these athletes will grab the excitement of the public. And in fact, a lot of people have questioned WNBA and whether it's good product or not. And I ask every single person, have you ever been to a WNBA game? If you haven't, you should withhold your judgment, because I have. In last year, the WNBA finals against the Suns and the Mystics had so much skill, so much drama, that you were so compelled by that product. But so many people have disregarded it before they even ever watched one game. And that to me is what we have to change. And there will be naysayers. And
well, you know what's interesting in women's lacrosse, the one thing, and because I coach girls lacrosse, I coach high school, and my Holy Trinity team, we won the state championship last year. And I get very frustrated when I hear a guy say, "Oh God, just put helmets on them and let them play." I'm like, they are playing, and they're actually more skilled than the boys are. Every year, and I'm not doing this just to make fun of the boys, but we used to do this all the time. We did it when my kids were in, grade school. At the end of the year, we'd have a boys versus girls game where the girls got to use the boy sticks and the boys had to use the girl sticks. The girls would win every game. I did it 2 years ago in high school. My girls killed our boys high school team because they were more skilled. But one of the issues was the rules. The rules were awkward. Now they've changed the rules. It's a faster game. It's more free-flowing. And last year, the Boston College versus UNC women's semifinal game had huge ratings on ESPN, because now it's like, hey, this is a great game to watch. This is a lot of fun. It's physical. It's fast. These are incredible athletes. So, we are behind that. But what's kind of exciting is that, on this show specifically, we had Kelly Nascimento DeLuca, who is, the executive producer with Susie Petroselli of Warriors of a Beautiful Game, which got picked up by Netflix. Right before that, we had Ross Greenberg, who is the president of Ross Greenberg Productions. Ross couldn't say it when he was on the show, and I was hoping that he could. He had told me off air, but that was just announced that Netflix has picked up Girls of Summer, which is a documentary / full-scale movie, just like he did. Ross had done the miracle of the 19 Olympic team. He had done the documentary, and then he had done the movie. Now he's doing the movie about the 1999 Women's World Cup team called Girls of Summer. So I'm hoping that with Susie Petroselli's book, Raised a Warrior, Kelly Nascimento, her documentary on Warriors of a Beautiful Game, and now Girls of Summer coming out, I'm hoping that this is just going to help with people seeing this and going, yeah, I prefer watching women's soccer than I do men's soccer. I do. I said it we had Anson Dorrance, who's the head women's coach. He won 21 national championships at UNC. I had him on the show. And I told him I prefer watching women's soccer because men's soccer, it's just too dramatic. They're always falling down. They're faking injuries. You don't see that with the women. And I like women's soccer better than I do men's. I like women's lacrosse better than I do men's.
And honestly, everyone should have their choice. No one is here to say one product is better than the other. There's big, fans of MLS or, other products, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's room for everyone. And
there's my dogs barking in the background. I said working from home.
There you go, you called it. But I love this other quote from Billie Jean King when she says, girls and women should not be satisfied with the crumbs. We want to have our cake and frosting and the cherry on top. But I like to add to that quote and to say, but it's not just one pie. There's a pie for the boys. There's a pie for the girls. There's enough cake for all of us. And what I'm excited about is that there is more visibility for top women athletes. And I don't know if you heard, but the ASPE hosts were just announced, and Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe are going to be joined by Russell Wilson as 3 hosts. And to me, this is such a, powerful choice of these great figures, right? Amazing athletes that have made a difference, and we should be elevating those stories. And so I'm super excited for the Father's Day ESPY show featuring these amazing stars. Yeah. So lots of.
Listen, this has been an amazing opportunity for me to, get to know you better and really learn more about the Women's Sports Foundation, because it's so important to me and so important to all the girls that I work with and coach. But we got to wrap it up. So we're going to come to our final 3 questions. So the final 3 questions. The first question comes from our prior guest. And the question of you is, what's the most courageous act that you've done in your life?
Well, I touched on it briefly. I didn't elaborate too much, but I do think, looking back, when I had a suitcase and a tennis racket and $500 in cash, no bank accounts, no credit cards, I've actually translated a book for a professor to make that money. And so I took that cash and flew across the ocean, not knowing where that journey is going to take me. And, I'm feeling emotional just sort of thinking about the story and not being able to call my parents to say I'm fine for 3 days, right? I spent almost a third of that money the first night because the dorms were closed by the time I got there. So I had to get a hotel, the Stadler Hotel on campus in Ithaca. And I am crying the next morning, just trying to figure out how this is all going to turn out. And fast forward, almost 30 years, I I don't regret that courageous move, but there are a few times people have asked me and said, if you had a chance to do it again, would you have? And I always hesitate. I love the outcome, but in that moment, it was very
Difficult.
scary and lonely and definitely uncertain. So I'm proud of.
Well, yours was a lot scarier than mine. I only had to
1990.
drive. I only had to drive 3 hours to Providence, but the difference was my mom gave me $100 and she said, "Make it last as long as you can." So
There you go.
it lasted for 4 years. So, but the next question is a question that you get to ask of our next guest. So, what's your question for our next guest?
Well, I'm gonna stick with the equity theme, and I'd love to know. I know we have our ideas of what people can do and what organizations can do, but I'd love to hear your guest's perspective on what they think that people should do to get us closer to an equitable future that we're dreaming about.
I love it. Now, last question, and for me,
Right.
this is my favorite because it really is what the Elevate Academy show is all about. I wanted this to be. I felt very lucky. I felt very lucky that I had good grades and I was a good athlete and I was able to go to Brown University, and I've been able to coach. I've been able to work with some of the best athletes in the country at elite levels who are friends of mine, and I'm always asking them what makes the great great. So. If it comes down to this, people come to this show because they want to hear smart people talking about what can they do differently and how can they do it. So with that being said, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten and who gave it to you?
So I've had a lot of different great life lessons, but the one that stands out to this day dates back to my early career days at Damon Worldwide, which was a private brand development company that I worked for many years. And the CEO, Peter Brennan, at the time, who recently passed away, has been a great mentor of mine in my early days at Damon. He always said that there's two parts to business success, and he says they're kind of 50-50. He said 50% is your ability, skills, hard work, and 50% relationships. And that balance is so important. If you are a brilliant jerk,
You're not going to go.
it could last, but it's not going to last forever. If you burn your bridges and don't have those relationships, it's not going to work. But if you all about relationship and schmoozing, and there's all this style and there's no substance behind it, eventually the relationships wear out and you're going to be out. So you have to balance it. And if you have both, you're going to be a successful individual. The rest, you figure out along the way. And so I've taken that to heart, and I always try to lead by example, work hard, but certainly value the friendships, the relationships, and the connections. And so I approach everything I do with that duality in mind.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. Well, listen, Olga, this has been really great for me. You talk about relationship. I'm glad that we've started this relationship, and hopefully our relationship will grow in the future. And however I can help with the Women's Sports Foundation, I'm willing to lend a hand and do whatever I can do. But, this has been fantastic. You have a great story to tell. And, I think all the girls need you.
Well, thank you. A pleasure was mine, and you have said so many things that we hope many people learn as we, tell our story of, social justice and everything we stand for. So I feel like we're going to call on you in the future to, to so genuinely spread the word and support our work as well. But we're hoping to be able to support your academy in the coming days and years. So thank you for everything you do.
Well, thanks so much, Olga. Everyone, have a great weekend. Keep elevating. Be nice to people. Be smart. Be safe. So elevate mind, body, game, life. Olga Harvey, you've been awesome. Thanks so much. See you, everybody.